Religion has been back in the headlines again this week, and not just because of its role in that violent protest through Sydney. The Australian Christian Lobby and the Anglican Archbishop of Sydney, Peter Jensen, both suggested that homosexual people do not live as long as heterosexuals.
As far as I can see, by trying to get to the facts, the lifespan of practising gays is significantly shorter than the ordinary so-called heterosexual man.
Well, the comments sparked an outcry as commentators insisted they were simply not based on fact.
Now, these comments came in the context of the continuing debate over same-sex marriage. So we are asking today whether religion has a place in politics and should politicians form policy based on their own religious beliefs. We are joined here in the studio by Reverend Bill Cruz, a minister in the Uniting Church of Australia, and by Marion Maddox, an academic and expert in the area of religion and politics. And in Melbourne today we also have the ethicist and author Dr. Leslie Cannold. Good morning to all of you.
Hello.
Reverend Bill Cruz, we'll start with you here. Do you believe that religion has any role to play in politics?
Well, your political views come from your spiritual beliefs, so it's inevitable and there's no way they can be cut off. There are some obvious ways, but in general, no, because what you believe with your soul or your whole being generates your politics, so that in lots of ways religion should generate a whole rainbow of politics rather than, say, one political structure or another.
Marion, you've done a lot of research on this. How much influence do you think religion has on Australian politics today?
It has a much wider influence than what we hear about. That's the main point. The Australian Christian Lobby want us to think that religion generates just one very narrow, particular kind of political view. In fact, people with religious beliefs come to a whole range of political views out of those religious beliefs. And in a democracy, there's no reason why we should or could tell people not to bring their religious views into political debate. But we know, for example, that over 50% of self-identified Christians support a right to same-sex marriage. The Australian Christian Lobby want us to think that Christian faith and support for same-sex marriage are diametrically opposed. We know that 3 out of 4 Catholics and 4 out of 5 Anglicans support a right to assisted death when life has come to an end and is only pain and suffering.
And they do.
And they do.
Isn't that interesting?
The Australian Christian Lobby want us to think that a Christian faith is diametrically opposed to support for assisted euthanasia. Well, it just isn't.
So this is a very powerful lobby, the Christian lobby.
It's a very small and unrepresentative group that doesn't speak for the majority of Christians, but they have been very successful at creating the impression of a groundswell where in fact none exists.
And religion in lots of ways is a good haven for bullies, because if you believe God's on your side, then you can do anything you like and say anything you like.
Yeah, Leslie, let's bring you in here. Is that the fault of the other religious groups not getting their word out there, and I suppose letting the, letting the argument be hijacked by the Christian lobby?
I certainly think that's an extremely good point, that it's not only people in minority religions, but it's also people who don't have faith, who need to be much more articulate and much more politically organised. So Marion is absolutely right that there is a disproportionate representation of very orthodox religious Christian people in our parliament that is completely disconnected from their representation in the wider community. And what we really need is sort of a secular get-up. We need an organisation that very, very clearly expresses the views of minority religions, people of no faith, and moderate Christians, who are by far the vast majority, to make sure that religious views are not imposed by one group on another and of people of no faith. Because you have to keep clear about this, that what religious freedom is the freedom of everybody to express their religion and not be discriminated against as a consequence of it, and not to have one religion dominating another in the public space. And at the moment in Australia there's a belief we have a separation of church and state, but in fact we really don't. We have a soft theocracy.
That's the strength of a good, decent, tolerant, secular society, that it keeps religions in their place, because we all know the horrors that happen when religions get in charge of countries.
Marion, do you think that Australians care? I mean, we have an atheist Prime Minister, we have a Catholic, a very strong believing Catholic opposition leader. It is in the media that we are interested, but do you think we really care? I mean, we're not really like the States where it's very important what religion you are.
No, and a lot of the religious positioning that we see on the part of religious lobbies and also politicians who play to that are not really playing to a religious part of the population. They're playing to a part of the population who might tick Christian on their census form but who don't actually feel very strongly about religion as such. What they feel strongly about is a sort of nostalgic sense that we've lost some sort of values or order or discipline or something, and religion maybe is where that comes from, even though they don't feel that they need religion in their lives themselves. So it's not something that Australians are going to probably get on a campaign trail about for separation of church and state the way Americans do. And I think that's one reason why we're in a sort of a not sure where to go position about it in Australia. We don't have a strong, despite appearances, we don't have a strong religious push within the population, and we also don't have a strong secularist push because it's not something that Australians historically have cared that much about.
Yeah.
So, Leslie, what's the message for politicians here in their campaigning, in the way they're, presenting themselves to the Australian public?
Well, I mean, I think the point you made before is absolutely right, that we very problematically think we're not like Americans, and as a consequence, we don't need to talk about this stuff. The reality is that there is a concerted push by people who are very orthodox and very conservative in their religious views to have a disproportionate say in terms of the way this country is run. And so what we need to have happen is that the media needs to make sure we look at those politicians and look at their beliefs, and whether or not, and this is the key, it's not what they believe, it's whether or not they want to impose those beliefs on everyone else. And when that's the case, I think as voters, we need to know that.
Because religious people can go and live however they like in a free society. It's just they don't have to kind of impose it on everybody else.
Yeah, and that certainly sounds like the Australian way. People don't like other opinions forced on them, do they?
Great debate.
Yeah, thank you
Bill,
very much.
Marion, Leslie, thank you all.
Thank you.
Very